Good morning, everyone. You're today going to hear from some students about 3 different Poole Grant trips. And I know Mrs. Frew has talked about this, but I just would simply remind you and encourage you to think seriously about both the Poole Grants and the Page Grants. These are 2 remarkable opportunities. Poole Grant we started many, many years ago, and the number of students who over the years have done great work, summer work, in volunteer work, conservation work, environmental work, community service. It's really fantastic. What happens is you would put in an application, Mrs. Frew and her committee would read it. If you're lucky enough to be chosen, essentially what happens is you are fully funded or partially funded for that trip. So it's a really great exercise to go through. Many of you will be doing this throughout your life, that is writing applications and asking for grant money. It's an important part of what we do. And the second one, of course, is the Page Grant. The emphasis there is in honor of Meg Page, who was really devoted to furthering the cause of medical research. If there's any area of medical research, internships, symposiums, conferences, anything like that you're interested in, I strongly recommend it. It's a wonderful opportunity. Not every school has it, and it's a way in which you can really act out the school motto. And the number of things that students have done over the years, the places they've gone around the globe to serve, is really remarkable and inspiring. And Mrs. Frew will introduce the students today, but again, keep an eye on email. She will send out details about it for a late February deadline for the application. So, Mrs. Frew.
So good morning again. So today we're going to hear about the Poole Grants, 3 experiences for Poole Grant recipients that they had. And you're going to hear about I and Emma, who were in Thailand, and then Johnny, who was in Appalachia and in West Virginia, and then Michael, who was in Ecuador, all over Ecuador. So you'll hear about these experiences. The Page Grant will be later on because of the snow day. But I really encourage you, again, these are very different experiences, but there are so many different opportunities out there. So investigate. I'll put out all the information on news, and we'll take it from there. Okay?
Good morning, everyone. I'm I.
And I'm Emma. We've been roommates since freshman year, and this summer, thanks to the Poole Grant Committee, we had the chance to go to Thailand and work with elephants.
We chose this trip because I knew that in Vietnam, poaching has always been an unpreventable problem, and we found out that because of poaching, the Asian elephant's population has dropped more than 50% over the past few years. Because the elephant's tusks start from their upper jaw, when someone wants an elephant's complete set of tusks, they have to severely injure the elephants, and unfortunately, the elephants are never able to survive poaching.
We wanted to learn more about this endangered species and help them as much as we could. We wanted to spread the word about elephant conservation, which is why we decided to speak to you today and tell you how awesome elephants are. The week we spent with these gentle giants was unforgettable, but we definitely didn't know what we signed up for.
On the first day, we learned to climb on and off elephants, and all of the commands in Thai, such as go,
Bye,
lay on your side,
map long,
stop,
how,
or turn,
Ben. Once you got over the fact that you could fall off this giant animal at any second, getting on wasn't that hard.
Yeah, it wasn't that hard unless you're 4'10" and assigned to the biggest elephant in the camp, which is over 10 feet tall. And for the first day, I could not get on my elephant, so it always results in me kicking my elephant in the head. And for the rest of the week, it gets even better. I get on my elephant by my mahout, the elephant trainer, and my partner, simultaneously pushing my butt up my elephant's head. And in the morning, we had to bathe our elephants before we could bathe ourselves.
And trust us, we really wanted to shower, especially after our mahouts, the professional elephant trainers, laughed while they told our elephants to map along or lay down in the disgusting water where all the other elephants bathe.
Both Emma and I fell off our elephants at least once while bathing them, and were fully submerged in the water with actual poop floating around in it. And yes, by submerged, we mean submerged, completely dunked in the water and head under the surface. And because I still cannot get on the elephant by myself, I fell off my elephants a lot of times, and whenever I try to get on, it always ends up in me kicking my mahout in the face.
After this morning ritual, we would spend time cleaning up the conservation center and planting bamboo trees, the main source of food for our elephants.
We also learned to weave baskets and make strings that would stabilize the baskets on our elephants' back for easy transportation. And don't worry, the elephants are so big that they can't even feel the weight of transported materials.
The afternoon activities often varied. We did all sorts of things, from visiting the baby elephant nursery. I think there's a picture for this.
Yeah.
To making elephant dung paper.
And at night, when we were all exhausted from our day and the hot and humid weather, we walked into our room only to find this and many other books on our bathroom floor.
Although we had a blast taking care of our elephants and getting to know our mahouts, the most memorable event was our last night that we spent deep in the jungle. After riding our elephants 2 hours into the woods, we helped refurbish the campsite.
Some of us went with our mahouts on the search for the strongest and most resilient bamboo trees to build tables and chairs, and others helped prepare the group's authentic dinner.
After that, we were able to spend time playing games and getting to know our mahouts. One of the counselors and I interviewed my mahout, Poon, with the help of a staff member who translated for us. When we asked him if he likes being a mahout, he said yes because he loves Tantuan, my elephant, so much, and he thinks she is such an amazing animal. He explained how he was connected to Tantuan and is really sad that, because he's turning 60 next year, he will be forced to retire after taking care of Tantuan for over 40 years.
All of the mahouts dedicated their entire lives to helping these elephants, and we were so grateful to be a part of that. This trip was even more special because Joyce Poole, daughter of Bob Poole, is one of the most active elephant conservationists. We want to thank her and the Poole Grant Committee for giving us this amazing opportunity, and we suggest that you all apply this spring.
If you want to talk to either of us about our trip, feel free to shoot us an email or just come up to us in the hallway.
Now Johnny is going to tell you about his very different trip to West Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Johnny Morgart, and I used my Poole Grant to travel to Beards Fork, Fayette County, West Virginia, where I was able to work with the organization Global Volunteers in doing community service in a poverty-stricken area for a week. Before detailing my adventure, just want to list some statistics about the area I was working in to put our lives into perspective. The per capita income of the town I worked in mostly was $14,000. I lived in a place with a population below 200 and didn't even have a zip code. There's one single lane street from the main road into it, and not a single business unless you count the community center where I stayed. Eviction notices seemed to be on every other house. If there wasn't an eviction notice, there was a Confederate flag flying high. In West Virginia, truancy rates, the action of staying away from school, ranges from 10% to 58%, and there was 54% in the county I was in. My journey began with a quick plane ride to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I boarded a tiny plane to Charleston, West Virginia. Me and the 15 other people on the high-demand flight eventually landed about an hour later. Once landing, Artie Mullins, a native of this abandoned town and the Global Volunteers director, picked me up and gave me the general history of where I was about to go. Basically, coal mining was, and still is, an extremely large part of the West Virginian economy. In the heyday of mining, people were pouring into the state, with Beards Fork's population booming to over 3,000. However, as the economy relied more on machine work than individual workers, and a new form of mining called mountaintopping that was more efficient, the entire state's economy collapsed, leaving small towns like this one I was in to slowly die off. On the way to Beards Fork, we rummaged through Walmart for our week's worth of food, since there was no grocery store that was close to the town, where I met my 68-year-old roommate named Steve, who would become one of my best friends over my time there. Once we arrived, we unpacked quickly, settled in, and started exploring the place. This was where we lived, the building on the right, and the community center where I worked was on the left. To give you an idea, this is the entirety of the town. this. Oh, okay. Well, a common tradition was, since repairing was so expensive, that once your car dies, you leave it where it lands and wait until you can get enough money for a new one. The average house looked like this. The town's population was entirely white and very isolationist. Most people that lived there have never left the state and have lived in Beards Fork their entire lives. The outside is scary to them and are unaccepting of change. As a result, we almost never saw townspeople, only their barking dogs, or broken down cars. That's the entire town. There were mainly two jobs to be done while I was there. One was to stay in the town and help the children with reading or arts and crafts in that little community center. Kids would be given 2 meals a day, sometimes 3 if they stayed later. Some of the parents of these kids were addicted to drugs, in prison, dropped out of high school or college, but all were in need of help, and the goal of the community center was to take them away from home for a bit, feeding children who normally wouldn't get any food. The other job, which I mostly did, was to go to a nearby town of Oak Hill. I helped with rebuilding an abandoned school building that the organization purchased and turned it into a community center. Painting walls, installing drop ceilings, hauling random useless things around from room to room were all part of the job. The volunteer group consisted of 12 other people that I lived with, but I most commonly worked with 4 people at the site, doing manual labor from 8 to 4 every day. This was the main room that I worked on, and there was a lot to be done. Initially, I had the worst possible job of taking glue adhesive, which smells and stings the skin on contact, in a burning type sensation, and scraping every last hint of glue up in order to eventually put down a new carpet. Oh. That's what it looks like on the ground. It looks like that in a bucket, and like that on all of my clothes. The next project was to install a drop ceiling, which is a styrofoam cover that's very common, then paint the walls and sand the floor down. With the assistance of workers getting paid to help us, we eventually completed our task. In general, the people we worked with were very unreliable. They showed up late, took longer lunch breaks, and left before our group of volunteers left, so we had to figure a lot out on our own. Before leaving, we did additional work in cleaning up a community garden, and it got looking at least functional by the end for the town of Oak Hill to use. After a week, I left back for Boston with a different perspective. I'm fortunate to be in a place with people who want to learn, who are gifted in various ways, and who care about helping each other. I'm thankful not to have to go down a one-way road and to have people everywhere that are inclusive. More than anything, I've learned to appreciate the beauty in life, in whatever form it comes in. Thank you to the Poole Grant Committee. Please ask me any questions you have, and here's Michael to talk about his time in Ecuador.
Hey, I'm Michael Mulder, and during the past summer, with the help of the Poole Grant, I was able to travel to Ecuador. I went through an organization known as LifeWorks International, and the whole trip lasted about 3 weeks. During that time, I was able to complete around 100 hours of community service and was able to explore 3 very different regions of Ecuador: the Galapagos, the Amazon, and the Andes. After flying into Quito very late the previous day, we spent our first day in Quito getting to know everyone in our group while exploring the city. In total, there were about 20 kids in the group, and the best part of the first day was being able to climb to the top of one of the towers of the Basilica. The following day, we used to travel to our next location, the Galapagos, where we would begin our community service. The Galapagos by far was my favorite place in Ecuador that we visited, and after landing on Baltra Island, we took a boat over to Santa Cruz, where we would be staying during our time in the Galapagos. The community service that we would be doing over the next couple of days on the Galapagos Islands focused largely on preserving the environment. The day after arriving there, we began our first project, which was cleaning up some of the beaches in the Galapagos to keep the animals that lived around the island from eating the plastic that people left behind on the shore. The beaches were unlike any other beach I've seen here in the United States, with crystal blue water and ginormous waves. After picking up tons of trash from the beach, for most of the day we were able to relax and cool off with a swim in the ocean. Our next day continued our community service with a trip to the highlands of the Galapagos. The rainy weather was a drastic change from the first day's hot, humid weather, and it made the long walk up to the highlands dangerous due to the slippery condition caused by the mud. Up in the highlands, we ran around in the wet, muddy area and pulled out tons of invasive species from the highlands that were threatening the lives of native species on the island. By the end, all of us were completely covered in mud and exhausted from pulling the invasive species that were about the size of a small tree. And finishing up our community service in the Galapagos, we took care of baby giant tortoises that were in a care center until they were old enough to be released back into the wild due to their declining population. We painted over 300 desks for a local school and finished it off by cleaning up the local community center. On one of our last days in the Galapagos, we took a break from the service and took a trip to the island of Bartolomé, during which we saw some of the unique wildlife that lives in the Galapagos, including marine iguanas, the Galapagos penguin, sea lions, and much more. During our time on Bartolomé, we were able to see the famous Pinnacle Rock. And after spending about a week in the Galapagos, it was time to return to Quito and then go off to the Amazon. After a short flight, we rode a boat down the river for over an hour to arrive at the place we would be staying at for about 5 days. During our time in the Amazon, we had a guide named Hector who had lived amongst an Amazonian tribe for a few years. He took us on hikes through the forest to see wildlife like spiders, snakes, and monkeys. He also organized our community service during our time in the Amazon, which again largely focused on the environment. Our main project in the Amazon was pulling lily pads out of a lake that was completely covered in them because the manatees were the only animal that ate the lily pads, and they are now extinct in that area of the world. Without the manatees, the lily pads grew uncontrollably and were threatening other species that lived in the lake. Our other two projects worked more closely with Hector's organization called Sumac Alpa. We first assisted Hector on his island, which was dedicated to the rehabilitation of monkeys in the Amazon. On his island, we built a new hut to keep his generator from getting wet when it rained. Following that, we stepped away from projects centered on improving the environment and spent the day with the kids of the Sumac Alpa school. We spent the vast majority of our day with them doing various activities, and a favorite of the kids was playing soccer. This concluded our time in the Amazon as we headed back to Quito for the night and then went up into the Andes Mountains for a few days as our final destination for our trip. In the Andes, we stayed in an eco lodge called the Black Sheep Inn, which was an interesting experience living without many of the modern day appliances that we use every day. We then spent a couple days helping out on the local farms in the Andes. This included various projects like helping out on their fields with other chores around their farm, like moving wood. During the time we were not working in the Andes, we went horseback riding through the mountains and took hikes in the mountains, during which we were able to see many impressive views of the Andes. After the trip was over and I returned to the United States, overall the trip involved a lot of hard work, but was fun and a great experience. I would encourage everybody to take a trip similar to mine and would like to thank the Poole Grant Committee for giving me this opportunity. Over the past few days, you have seen just a few of the opportunities that the Poole Grant has to offer, and if you have any questions, you can ask either Ms. Frew, Ms. Monty, or Ms. Borkin.